At Method Learning, our college prep experts are here to guide your student every step of the way. From boosting ACT SAT scores with proven test prep strategies to navigating the complex world of college admissions and to maximizing financial aid and scholarships, we provide the expertise your family needs for success. Join us as we talk to our Method Learning experts to provide you the insights into how your student can excel through the college process.
Thanks for being with us for this series. We're really excited about spotlighting one of our test prep experts today. We have Evan Wessler with us today. Evan, why don't you go ahead and tell us about your where you live, your education background, and how you got into the field of test prep.
Sure. So I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I have been in test prep since 2009. I joined then Method Test Prep, now Method Learning, and that was almost immediately after I graduated from Bucknell University. I did a brief stint in graduate school before deciding I wanted to change my path a little bit and started tutoring for Method Test Prep. And I had been tutoring for a very long time, since high school, really. And it was just a natural fit for what I wanted to do then in the short term. And then it snowballed into something that was a real long-term fit. So it's just had a 15-year, I guess, celebration or acknowledgement of sorts. And it's amazing because it's gone really quickly, but it's been great.
That's great. Is there something specifically that inspired you to get started in test prep and become an expert?
I wouldn't say anything specific. I get a real kick out of explaining things and explaining things well and understanding that people get them. And for whatever reason, science and math and English and history, it all gives kind of that equal dopamine hit. So I always enjoyed working both one-on-one and in the classroom, but I started with one-on-one, and that feeling of doing the job really well, getting someone to understand something was always what drove me, and doing that even more competently and more comprehensively. So that's what got me into it, and that's what stuck.
Well, I think your ability to explain in multiple different ways and modalities is clearly on display. For anybody who's used Methodize, our self-paced learning platform, you're responsible for a lot of the material that's in there. A lot of the explanations come straight from your brain, and you do a phenomenal job of finding many different pathways to get to somebody's understanding. And I think that's definitely one of your big strengths. It's on display.
Thanks.
What's the number one tip that you usually give to students in order to help boost their scores?
It's to think about the SAT or ACT, or really any test they're taking, as rather than a series of individual questions, they should think about it as a series of questions that can be grouped into several predictable categories that always have to be asked about, and for which the questions always have to be formulated in pretty much the same way every time. So when you're doing question number 17 on whatever section on whatever exam, it's not just that question. It's connected to a whole series of questions that are very similar to that question. Maybe they change a detail, or they add something, or they get rid of something. But you really want to be able to recognize the connection between that question and other questions similar to it, and adopt an umbrella strategy that can be applied to all of those. Because effective test prep is about recognizing connections, noticing patterns, and tying them together. And that's what allows you to increase your scores. It's not about building one skill and hoping you see something where you can apply that again. It's knowing that you can build that skill and knowing that you will be able to apply it again, and developing your ability to recognize when that can happen.
That's really interesting. I think there's having a larger, bigger picture understanding of the test itself is probably something that most 16 and 17-year-olds are not approaching with. So I can see how that could be really helpful to share with your students.
Sure.
What are the most common mistakes you see kids making during test prep, and how do you help them avoid them?
I think there are a couple of things. One would be practicing without timing. And the fact of the matter is, while you can become an expert at any number of pieces of the content, it's really inextricably linked to the time that you're allotted to complete that content, to answer those questions. So if you don't practice with timing, what you're doing is just cutting off an entire element that's meant to test your ability, and you're not exercising the full range of your abilities in a way that'll make you aware and capable of increasing your score. So if you practice without timing, you're denying yourself that. So definitely practice with timing. And then the other thing is, when you figure out answers that you or questions that you answered incorrectly, what you've got to do is look for those umbrella strategies that I just mentioned. It's not just, okay, well, here's the solution, here's the answer, and move on. You've really got to see what strategy it ties to. And that's going to allow you to answer questions that are similar to it in the future, just like I was saying before. You don't want to treat questions like one-off incidents. You want to treat them as gateways into learning strategy and technique, and those things will help you answer many more questions correctly.
For the audience, can you give an example of one of those umbrella strategies?
Sure. So they apply across all of the different sections. If you take a reading and writing question, for example, from the SAT, a lot of students will read passages and then they'll go immediately to the answer choices of the question and try to have the questions give them, or the answer choices themselves give them hints, and sort of base their answers off of how the answer choices sound. And what they don't realize is that the incorrect answer choices are written in so specific a way to pull them in different directions that they're actually being manipulated in real time. So when they get an answer, or let's say a reading question, incorrect, they might say, oh, well, I didn't notice this word, or I didn't notice this detail. And so, of course, answer choice B is correct and not C like I picked. But that's not really the best way to improve, because that's so hyper-specific to that one question, you're really not training yourself to take any skills that you learn from that question and apply them elsewhere. So instead, you should approach the question in a way that will allow you to apply and exercise a strategy. So how could I have approached it differently? Could I have done a little thinking before looking at the answer choices? Could I have anticipated something differently? And one of the best ways to increase your skills is to go back to that question and try it via that route, and not let the answers manipulate you. And so that's just one example on the reading and writing. And there are, analogous examples on the math, where, if you see something with let's say a quadratic equation, and they're asking about some element of that equation, okay, how has what I've seen before, how does that link to what I'm looking at now, and how will that link to other questions that may ask for a slightly different thing or give you a different piece of information? All of that is stuff that you can store in a mental toolkit that you can then apply regardless of what you're asked, even if there are little tweaks that you need to incorporate.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. How do you customize your approach for different learning styles with kids that you work with?
I ask a lot of questions, and I don't know if it's more questions than other tutors ask, but I get the students I work with talking a lot. And not only does that make the sessions more engaging, but it actually forces them in a way to formulate their ideas and challenge preconceived notions that they might have, and really recognize when they actually don't understand what they're thinking. it's this, there's this whole thing called metacognition, which is, it's really thinking about thinking. It's this next level of understanding how we go into thought processes. And, a lot of the time, I mean, most of us, most of the day, are not thinking about how we're thinking. We're just thinking. We're not really conscious of that process. But to become better at testing, especially standardized testing, you do have to be conscious. You have to actively ask yourself questions as if you're in a conversation with yourself. And that might seem a little bit crazy, but actually it deepens the experience of working through a problem and solving a problem and actively asking yourself, what do I know? Where have I seen this before? What does this look similar to? And so all of those questions, if you're consciously asking them, you're doing a better job of analysis in real time.
It's a great approach. It's a great approach, and I know that you, as one of the key trainers of our tutoring team and developers of our tutoring team, incorporate that into the way that you want to see the tutors work with families. So yeah, I love that. That's great. Can you share and lastly, can you share a memorable success story where you had a student that achieved their goals with your guidance?
Sure. Yeah, I recently had a student, and I've had many students like this one, but this student came in pretty intimidating by the SAT reading and writing, especially the chunkier, more technical sounding, more sciencey passages. There are a lot of higher level, almost like journal article type passages where they're explaining some sort of experiment and procedure and results, and you have to anticipate evidence that would help strengthen a hypothesis or something like that. And they can be very dense and very full of jargon, and so the student was very intimidated, and it was depressing the score a lot, and I could see that this student had a lot of ability with comprehension, but it just wasn't being challenged or channeled the right way. And so it was really reformulating how this student approached a reading passage. And we worked hard on reconstructing the entire reading approach specifically for the SAT, which is a lot different than reading for leisure or even reading for an assigned English text in school. And we worked really hard on that, applying technique, exercising strategy. And when the students' SAT results recently came back, we saw a 100-point increase on the reading and writing section alone. And it was incredibly gratifying because we put the work in and got the results out. And that's what you want to see. That's
great. All right, Evan. Well, thank you so much for being with us. Evan Wessler today, our VP of Education here at Method, and does a lot of our content for us, as well as works with our tutoring team to make sure that they're all up to snuff for us. And so thanks for everything that you do, Evan. We really appreciate you and all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks.